Hi, I'm back again. So today what I'll be doing, we'll be showing you how to create essentially a virtual router for a network. So this is something that you won't typically need to do, but I kind of use this methodology if I want to kind of simulate various different things. I can kind of have a virtual router in between various different networks within my lab. And then also I can have a fully isolated network, and then if I want to give that network access to the internet, I can use this virtual router to give access to my real internet. So let's get started. So for the purpose of this, we're going to start off with a clean, fresh install of Windows Server 2016. So you could do this with 2012 R2, or you can actually really use like a Linux firewall based appliance to do something similar. For the purpose of this, I'm going to keep it in Windows LAN and use Windows Server 2016. So we'll go ahead and say next, install now. So you've probably seen this, maybe seen this before, but Windows Server install is not that complicated. This is going to be a fairly simple install. Right now I don't have a product key, so I'm just going to hit don't have product key, let this run as evaluation, and I'm going to install this as a data center with desktop experience. Say next. And you can use standard as well. There's nothing specific to data center that I'm using that requires data center. It's just that I'm using like a data center for pretty much everything else, so I'll put this as data center as well. For formatting, I'm just going to let it do its thing and not select any options and say next. And that's pretty much it. It'll go ahead, go through and install Windows Server 2016. So you can see you can pretty much get Windows Server 2016 off, at least starting the installation in pretty much less than a minute to get that going. So we'll let this run. It's going to take way more than a minute to install, but to get kicking it off, just next. Put in license key if you have one, and then you're off to the races. So I'm going to let this go ahead and finish up, and then we'll be right back. Alright, so that's successfully installed. So now what I'm going to do is that prompted me to put in a password. So I'll go ahead and provide a password for this one. Hit finish. Alright, so I can go ahead and log in now. Alright, so now I'm back in. I've logged into the server. It's fully installed now, and I'm on the server manager dashboard. So now what I do, I can just jump over to local server. It'll show me some things about the server. So you see we have a randomly generated name right now. And what I can do, I want to go ahead and click on server manager name. And I want to change. And I want to name this system router 1. It's the name that I want to give it. Go ahead and say OK. And say OK again. And then close. And I'm not going to actually reboot. I'm going to restart later. So now what I'm going to do is go ahead over to my network insurance settings, center settings. Alright, so once that shows up, I'm going to go to change adapter settings. So in like Server 2016, they got all these extra network GUIs and things like that I'm not really that much of a fan of it, but I prefer this view here. So I normally go over to this view. So you can see here, this system actually has 2 network adapters. So we take a look here. So we see here, as I previously mentioned, that I had set up DHCP on this network in a previous video. So now we can see that this system actually obtained a DHCP server address from the network. So DHCP is definitely working. Very good. But for the purpose of this, I don't actually want to use DHCP for this router. So let's go ahead and change that. Alright, so I'm going to go ahead and give this a static IP address of 192.168.150.254. And it does not have a gateway. Technically it doesn't. Well, I'll let it point to the domain controller for DNS. That's fine for that network. And I'm going to actually just rename these to make it more clear on what the purpose of these networks are. So my Ethernet network 2 will be, I'll name this one internal network. All right. Give that one that name. Right, and this one, this will be my internet-facing network. So right now, you can see this one is actually already connected out to the internet. It received the network IP address from my another virtual network that's within my lab, where it received its IP address from, and then that network is connected out to the real internet network. So just kind of some isolation, some hops in betweens and things like that, just so I could kind of, as I mentioned, I could simulate various different scenarios. But for the purpose of this, that doesn't matter that much. So main thing is that you connect one network adapter to your internal network, and you connect one network adapter to the real internet. All right, so I'll name that one internet network. All right, so now what I need to do is let's jump back over to Server Manager, and actually I'll go ahead and let the server reboot for that change I did. So let's go ahead and restart, and let's say this is planned maintenance, and say continue, and let's go ahead and let that restart. All right, so the server has rebooted. I've already logged in, and it's coming back up. So once this is a backup, what we want to do, we actually want to add roles and features. Want to add an additional role and feature to the system. Let's go ahead and say next. Role-based or feature-based installation, make sure that's checked and go next. And just my router 1. So you can see we have that new name of router 1. We have the IP addresses that we previously configured. So we have one that I assigned statically on the internal network. And then I have another one that's assigned dynamically that's coming from the internet-facing side of the network. Go ahead and say next. And so the role that I want to install will be, they've changed the name of this stuff from time to time. I believe it's the remote access one is what I want. Yeah, I believe it's the remote access. So let's go with that theory, that's the right one. Let's go next. And go next again, and go next again. So for the purpose of this, we want routing. Routing functionality is what we want. And we just go ahead and say add features, add all of the extra requirements that it needs. Go next, and go next. I'll leave everything for IIS as at default, won't modify any of those. And go ahead and install. So one thing you may have noticed, I didn't join this system to the domain, and actually for the purpose of this, I won't. Since this system doesn't really need any domain connectivity for the most part, I'm kind of having it as a separate entity that will help manage internet traffic for this private domain. But I very well could add it to the domain, but for the purpose of this, I won't. So we'll go ahead and let those features install, and then we will continue. So that installed successfully. So as you can see, it's prompting telling me that some configurations is required to get this remote access connectivity and things going. So I'm going to go ahead and open the Getting Started wizard, and I'm going to go ahead and close out of this window here. And up here, this kind of tells me similar things, some additional configuration required. So that should pop up somewhere here. There we go. Okay. This took a couple seconds. So looking at these options here, none of this is actually what I want to do. So let's see how can we trick this. Let's see if we do. See if I do VPN only. What does that get me? Okay, at least that got me tier. So this is really where I want to be. I want to be on the more legacy routing and remote access view. So I can see I have that there. So I'm going to go right click on the router and configure and enable routing and remote access. And then we're going to say next. And then here, what I want to do a custom configuration, because really none of these options are really quite what I want to do. Well, I guess this is kind of close. Secure connection between two private networks, but I'm going to go ahead and try to go with the custom configuration solution and then go next. So I want to enable LAN routing, and I also probably want NAT at some point. These other ones, I don't really need those, so I'll leave those unchecked. Say next and finish. So that'll go ahead and try to set up those services, start those services up, and be ready for me to go and configure a little more things once that gets fully up and running. Should be just a few more seconds here, should get it going. Alright, so now my router is up and running. So let's go ahead and maximize this out. Because if I click on network interfaces, I can see those two network interfaces that I renamed. But you see I also have another one. So I have internal network, internet network, a loopback, as well as internal. So I'm going to go ahead and go to IPv4. And if I go to general, again, I can see those interfaces. I go to NAT. So for NAT, what I want to do, I'm going to go ahead and say new interface for my NAT interface. I want to add my internal network. And so my internal network, again, that's private interface connected to the private network. Go ahead and say apply on that. And then I also want to add another interface, this time my internet network interface. And that is a public interface connected to the internet. And I want to enable NAT on this interface. And go ahead and say apply. And okay. So if you want to do a little bit more advanced things, if you wanted to like do port forwarding and things like that, this does have those capabilities, but for the purpose of this, I'm not going to do any of that. Go ahead and say OK. Alright, so let's see what else. New routing protocol. I'm good there. I could broadcast my DHCP. I'm not going to do that. So I should be good to go. So theoretically, now if I point one of my other servers to this system, to this 192.168.150.254 as their default gateway, I should be able to get out to the internet. But let's just check and see, can this system itself get out to the internet. So I'm just going to open up command prompt, and I'm just going to try to ping msn.com. So I got a response from DNS. So that tells me that at least DNS worked. I was able to go out to the internet and resolve that address using one of my DNS servers. So obviously, if it hits the one that's on my domain controller, that will fail because that currently does not have internet access. But say if I pointed directly to, say, Google's DNS server, that should be successful. But let's test it out, and it is. So, all right. So just resolve msn.com using Google's public DNS server, which tells me that, hey, I do have some type of internet connectivity and I am getting out from this router using those two connections. So now what I'm going to do, I'm going to hop over to my domain controller and configure that to use this server as its default gateway. And then let's do that same test before and after and see what happens. So be right back. Alright, so here I am over on this domain controller. I've already ran sconfig, so I'm going to just go ahead and go back out to the command prompt, and I'm just going to try to ping the 150.254. So currently see that I can't ping that, and the reason for that is that since this system, DC1 is on the domain and router 1 is not. So I believe by default, router 1 will actually block that traffic per its default firewall policy. So what I'm going to do, I'll just set up a continuous ping to this real quick. So this system will continue trying to ping, and while that's happening, you're not gonna see this, but I'm gonna go over to router 1 and go and modify its firewall settings to allow anyone to ping it, be it if they're in the same domain or anything, and then let's see if that works. So once that starts working, we should start seeing these pings on DC1 be successful. So let's go and try that out. So I'll just kind of talk through to what I'm seeing since you're currently, you can't, the viewer can't see this. But what I'm doing, I'm opening up the Windows Firewall with advanced security settings application. And then I'm looking at my inbound firewall rules. So one of the built-in firewall rules is that there's one for echo requests, IPv4 echo requests, and it's disabled by default. So what I'm going to do, I'm just going to turn that on, enable that. So I just enabled it now, and there we go. So now we're seeing, so we verify we do have connectivity from DC1 to the router 1. So that's good. All right, so let's hop back over to DC1. That firewall rule is enabled to allow the ping, so we know the network connectivity, at least locally and internally, is working. So now what I want to do, let's try to do that same test we did on router 1. Let's do NSLOOKUP against msn.com using 8.8.8. And now at this point, this should fail because at this point, this system does not have any internet connectivity to get out. It's not configured to use that router 1 to get out to internet. So let's go ahead and go and fix that. Sconfig again, go into our network settings. We'll select adapter 1. We'll do set network adapter address. And then we're going to use static IP address again. So I'm going to use that same address, 150.1. Hit enter. Use that same subnet mask. And now this time for default gateway, I want to put 192.168.150.254. Alright, and I'll leave everything else the same. DNS server, so it's using itself for DNS, since it is a local DNS server. And let's go back to the command prompt. Alright, so now let's try that same thing again. And there we go. So now what's happening, DC1 is effectively using router 1 to get out to the internet. And through router 1, it can actually get to a few other areas of my network as well that is interconnected, but the main piece that I wanted to give it access to is its ability to go out to the internet. And even if I do NSLOOKUP without going to Google's DNS server, it should be able to look that up itself locally and get a response, theoretically. Actually, yeah, I'm not sure why that's not working. Yeah, I have to test that, figure that out, why can't it get out itself? It should be able to right now. I may need to take a look at my DNS settings and see what's going on there. Yeah, that's weird. Let me see if I do a yeah, if I use Google's, I definitely get out, but if I use itself, I do not get out. Yeah, I have to look into that to figure out what's going on there. But I definitely have connectivity. The connectivity is going out, so I wonder if it's getting fused somehow. No, I only have a single network, so that shouldn't be the problem. Yeah, let me figure that out, and then I'll be right back to figure out what's going on there. Okay, I'm back. So I actually figured it out pretty quick. It took me about 15 seconds, and I immediately saw what the problem is. What looked like what happened is that my ISP, they are actually broadcasting now IPv6 addresses. And so for the period of time when my domain controller was receiving a DHCP address, it actually received an IPv6 address to forward DNS requests to. And because I'm not using that, it's actually breaking my network right now for my domain controller to be able to resolve addresses over IPv4. So what I need to do is on my domain controller, I need to actually manually remove those entries that my ISP is broadcasting into my network, and that my system just happened to pick that up and is actually trying to use that now, but it's failing. I'll fix that, and then we'll be right back. Actually, maybe I should show you what I'm trying to do. So yeah, I'll do that. I'll jump over to my management box and actually show you what I'm babbling on about. All right, so here I go ahead and connect it over to my management server, and I'm going to go ahead and run the DNS management tool. And so again, I'm looking at my domain controller, which is also a DNS server. And if I right click here and go to properties, I can see right now, so I'm using IPv6 as well as IPv4, which actually I don't want to do. So I'm going to go ahead and stop using IPv6 address. Go ahead and apply that. And then I'll look at forwarders. I have all of these addresses here that are coming from my ISP. So I'm going to actually go ahead and drop all of those addresses. And then I'm going to manually put in their IPv4 address. So say if I were to just put in Google's, for example, if I want to use that as my forwarder. So what will happen, anytime my domain controller does not know the IP address of an address, it'll forward that over to Google and say, hey, Google, what is IP address for this? And then Google hopefully should respond, and then it'll forward that back to the requesting client. All right, so I'll go ahead and make that change. And ideally, you should have multiple entries here, but for the purpose of this test, I'll just do that one. And then I'm going to hop back over to the domain controller and then do the... All right, so now I'm back over on DC1. So I'm going to just go ahead and try that same lookup again, locally though. So now you see it's successful. If I do an NS lookup against Microsoft.com, comes back right away, because what's happening, it hits my local domain controller DNS. It says, hey, I don't know that address. It goes and asks Google's, and then Google is responding back with that IP address. And I could use my own ISP addresses as well. That may be a little bit faster to use that, like I said, what was happening is that since my ISP, like in the past few months, they actually started broadcasting real routable IPv6 addresses to my network, in my internal network. So what's happening, even if I'm not trying to use IPv6, clients and everything on my network will get a real routable IPv6 address, and it kind of causes problems with my internal network as because I'm doing my own routing and other things like that. So sometimes the IPv6 will take precedence, and then so some things will try to get sent out over IPv6, and because I'm not trying to use that, certain things will break or not work. So a lot of time I have to proactively block that what my ISP is pushing down into my internal network. So that was just showing you that. But yeah, look, we're good now. My domain controller can self-resolve addresses. It's forwarding those out across the internet successfully, and all that traffic is being routed through my Windows Server 2016 virtual router that actually has direct connectivity to the internet, versus this domain controller does not. It has to go through that that router 1 server in order to get out to the internet or any other part of my internal lab network. All right, so I hope this has been informative and useful for you. So thanks for watching, and I will see you in the next one.